Hello and welcome back to Parc Fermé Parlay with Kieran Downey. Yep, so we are here to discuss the practice sessions, FP1 and FP2, from the Spanish Grand Prix. And in a surprise to no one, they were fairly underwhelming. Barcelona is not the most exciting track on the calendar, and FP1 and FP2 are not the most exciting sessions we see. So in FP1, the big news was obviously Oliver Bearman, who was taking part in the session in place of Nico Hülkenberg, not lighting up the timesheets, but doing just a good job. All he had to do was keep the car on track and keep his timing in and around that of the other Haas car of Kevin Magnussen, which is what he did. Magnussen finished FP1 in 17th, Ollie finished FP1 in 19th. You can't argue with it. Like, as I said, he's not lighting up the timesheets, but that's not what he's there to do. He's just there to get the feeling, get comfortable. However, what I will say is it's been quite interesting to see the change in Oliver Bearman, who went into Saudi Arabia as this nice, sort of timid young man who was getting ready to do a monumental thing, being that little bit cocky because he's like, I'm ready to be in F1, like, just sign me on the seat. And he'll say things and then he'll be like, oh, and he'll like, change it up a little bit. But it's almost time, like, I don't know why we're still waiting for the confirmation of Oliver Bearman. I don't understand it. Now, at the press conference the other day, Kevin Magnussen was asked, what's the cork in the bottle stopping you from signing whatever, and he was like, it's Carlos. Fair enough, I will say Carlos is the one that's stopping a few other decisions. I don't think what Carlos does is going to have any impact on the seats at Mercedes or at Haas. That Mercedes seat seems to be taken by Kimi Antonelli. Toto Wolff is all over the Kimi Antonelli hype train. The Haas seat, one of them is obviously Oliver Bearman, and I believe the other one will be Esteban Ocon. Do I think Kevin Magnussen is going to be here in 2025? Probably not. I know I said in my driver predictions like a month or so ago that I thought he would be lining up, but actually just as time goes on, I just don't see it happening. So yeah, it was nice to see Oliver Bearman out on track. I mean, Ollie's got a very big weekend ahead of him. He went straight from F2 practice into F1 practice into an F2 quali. And then he's obviously got the sprint race and the feature race for F2 this weekend. So, big weekend for Oliver Bearman. The other news this weekend is the upgrade. So, from what I can see, Red Bull have brought a fairly large upgrade. Ferrari have brought a very big upgrade package. Aston Martin have brought upgrades. Visa, Cash App RB have also brought quite a big upgrade package. Haas have got a component, and Stake have also got a couple of components. Whether or not that will do anything to help the wheelie bin of the Stake car, I don't know. But FP1 was filled with a lot of the teams testing their cars out with these upgrade packages. For Ferrari, Carlos Sainz ran the upgrades in FP1, Charles Leclerc didn't, but by FP2 they both had the upgrades. And whether or not that's made a difference for Charles, I'm not entirely too sure. He was complaining that the car felt horrendous in FP1, which but seemed to have a better time in FP2. So it will be interesting to see where they are in and around qualifying. Sainz was having a much better weekend. He, I think, topped the timing sheets. I think he was P3 in FP1 and then P2 in FP2. So promising from him. But in terms of like FP1, not really much else to say. Perez and Verstappen both feeling uncomfortable in the car. FP2 came around, Max again saying not feeling 100% comfortable with the car, but we've seen this before where in practice Max is sort of struggling with that car and then can just really fine-tune the details in and then can go on a winning race. He did it in Canada, probably going to do it this time round as well. Now, as I've said, the practice sessions were fairly boring, and Barcelona is a quite boring track sometimes, but my God, has it baited us into, well, it's baited me into thinking that we could be on for a little something spicy this weekend, because Lewis Hamilton has topped the timesheets in FP2. I know. Apparently, Mercedes have done something to this car. I don't know whether they've like flipped the switch. I don't know what it is they've done, but now all anyone's talking about is how much of a difference it's made to the cars, and they wish they'd done it sooner because the car is a lot more competitive now, and that's exciting for me. That is exciting for me because now I'm going into this weekend or into qualifying. Be interesting to see what happens in FP3. We've not had that yet. It's in a couple of hours. But I'm going into the further sessions of this weekend thinking, do we have a four team fight for the win? The two Mercedes, the two McLarens, maybe the two Ferraris, and Max. Both Mercedes drivers saying they feel very comfortable in the car, so it's promising to see. Ferrari, do I think Ferrari will be right at the front? Not really. I think they're going to have a much better weekend in Canada, but I think they will be just outside the podium positions. I think that podium is going to be a good Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes mix. That's what I feel. I feel it in my bones up there. Williams not looking promising so far. Finished FP2. Both their drivers were sitting 19th and 20th, which is not what they're going to want to see. So I'm hesitant to think that we're going to get any sort of good performance from Williams this weekend. I don't know why. I don't think we're going to see great things. However, in other news, Gasly sticking that Alpine P5 in FP2. So, maybe he saw Flavio Briatore who's back at the team and just, put his foot down a bit more. We will come on to the whole Flavio bit in a minute. The only other person I want to speak about from free practice is Perez, because I'm very intrigued as to where Perez is going to start this race. He's going into this weekend with a 3-place grid penalty from Canada for driving his car in an unsafe condition. And he's come out of the first 2 free practice sessions with a best result of P13. It's wild. I'm going to hold it all back and we'll see what happens after the race on Sunday. We'll see what happens after quali and where he's going to start the race, because obviously he's got that grid penalty to serve and he just needs to do better. Now, speaking of the Red Bull situation from last weekend, I'm going to segue into the return of Flavio Briatore. Last weekend, Perez spun off the track and broke his rear wing. He was then instructed by the team to drive the car back to the pits because they wanted to avoid a safety car. Now, after that had all happened, Will Buxton had come out and put a tweet out that has now been deleted, in which he compared it to Crashgate of 2008. And who was responsible for Crashgate in 2008? Flavio Briatore. Can you see what I've done? Segueing in. I feel like it would have been easier to segue in from the Alpine guys, but we're going this way. Flavio Briatore is back at Alpine. I know, right? I know. I can't remember. He's not like a team principal. He's like an advisor on some nonsense. Hold on. I actually tweeted about it. Official tagline is he will be an executive advisor of the Alpine F1 division. Now, in a statement, the team said Briatore will predominantly focus on top-level areas of the team, including scouting top talents, providing insights on the driver market, challenging the existing project by assessing the current structure, and advising on some strategic matters within the sport. Whatever job he's going to be doing at Alpine, do I think Flavio Briatore should be back at Alpine or back working within F1? Absolutely not. There is not one part of me that feels okay about this situation. Now, for anyone who doesn't know who Flavio Briatore is, Flavio was the team principal of the Renault team back in 2008. And at the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix, instructed one of their drivers, Nelson Piquet Jr., to crash his car on purpose to allow Fernando Alonso, who was his teammate, to win the race. It was, and still is to this day, probably the biggest stain on Formula One. it made the sport look like a complete joke, that level of cheating could happen. You would instruct a driver to purposefully put themselves in harm's way by crashing their car to advantage your teammate and, get them a win. But not that long after the incident, Nelson Piquet Jr. actually became a whistleblower and went to the FIA and told them the truth about what had happened. It became a huge scandal, obviously. Briatore resigned from his position, but was then actually banned from ever owning or working within the sport or any FIA-sanctioned sport. It was a decision that was later overturned by a tribunal court in France, and he's back. I can't, there's no part of me that's okay with it. And to be fair, we could also say this about Pat Symonds. Now, Pat Symonds was also working at Renault at the time. He was also caught up in that whole thing and was part of the decision-making process. He also resigned along with Flavio. He was also banned from the sport. His ban was also overturned. He worked for Formula One itself as the chief technical officer up until 2024. He's the executive engineering consultant for their F1 division. But there's no part of me feels okay about it. And actually, I don't think anybody really feels that great about it. Damon Hill usually rides the fence on these kind of things. And even he was a bit like, yeah, that doesn't really sit right with me. None of the commentators on Sky really seemed okay with it. I just can't believe he's back. I think it's a bit of an embarrassment, to be honest with you, that he's back at the sport. I think it's quite embarrassing for the sport that he's been allowed to return, but we shall see what happens. So I asked you guys what you thought about Flavio's return to F1, and nobody had a good thing to say, to be honest with you. We got red flags by Existing Chris. It's Mari Like Kamari said creepy. PS3 Matt said disappointing, backward step. We got disgusting. We got if that's the best Alpine can do, they're in worse trouble than we thought. Unsavory. Morals are pretty rare in F1, so it's no surprise. Whoa. We got people said that he deserved the ban. It should never been overturned. He should still be banned. I tend to agree. So yeah, that's it. Flavio Briatore's back. And we had 2 fairly boring practice sessions. As I've said, it'll be interesting to see where Perez will start the race, given his pretty poor performance in practice and his grid penalty that he's going to have to serve. I'm intrigued to see what Max can do this weekend. I'm not too worried, as I've said. He's struggled in practice with this car before and has then gone and done some fine-tuning and won the race. I'm intrigued to see what these top teams can do, what the Ferraris, the McLarens, the Mercedes, especially Mercedes, and Max can actually do across qualifying in the race. I think it's going to be quite interesting to see. And enjoy all the cars out on track today, because we've got a lot of cars. We've got, in about half an hour, the F3 Sprint, then we've got FP3 for F1, the F2 Sprint, qualifying, F1 Academy's Race 1. IndyCar's on tonight, I believe, as well. It's a full day of motorsport, and I am pumped. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. I will see you later. Love you. Bye!